Hello, everyone.
Good morning, Frank.
Good morning. We're excited to be here. And this week, I don't think we may run into some technical issues, but I don't think we will. Rod, Michael, what do you think?
I think we're good to go.
You think we're good to go? Excellent. Well, because this is a webinar, we're going to give people a little bit of time to jump in and have just a few moments to connect with us. And so in the meantime, let's give everybody about a minute or two to hop into the live stream, and then we can begin. John, you are our special guest today. I haven't even introduced you yet, but you mentioned a very interesting fact just a few moments ago in our pre-show that it's fascinating to me. So 2020 was the year that you actually still had a BlackBerry and have now opted out for a Samsung device.
That is true.
It's Frank. Incredible.
I'm proud of the fact that I had it for so long, and it worked very well. It ran Android, but I just couldn't give up the physical keyboard. You could type so much faster. The touchscreen, I don't know. I just can't quite get the hang of it. So I'm hoping they're saying Onward Mobility is going to create a BlackBerry.
Wow.
This year they're supposed to release it. So I'm hopeful that I can go back.
There are still customers, BlackBerry. You hear that? There are still customers. Well, everyone, welcome to our Reliable Leadership webinar series. During these live events, the founding partners of Relia Healthcare, you have Dr. Rod Brace and Dr. Michael Shabbat, join me, Frank Dana, from Softway, as we get a chance to connect with leaders from a wide variety of organizations about reliable leadership, high reliability teams and organizations, and what it takes to build truly reliable, inclusive, and zero harm workplaces. So this week, I'm very excited to have John join us in this webinar. John Keevan, I would love for you to share a bit about who you are and your background and what you do today.
Sure. Thanks, Frank. I assured Rod that I would tell everybody that I am older than I look. I have been in healthcare for about 15 years now since grad school. I've had the pleasure of working at some really remarkable organizations. Currently, I serve as Senior Vice President, Hospital President at Wellstar Health System. Wellstar is a large healthcare system in the Atlanta area, stemming down to a little bit of Southwest and Southeast Georgia. I'm the hospital president at our Wellstar Paulding Hospital, which is in Northwest Atlanta. It's we have a 112-bed acute care hospital, 182-bed nursing home. And as of about a month and a half ago, I'm also the interim president at the Wellstar Cobb Hospital, which is a 382-bed community hospital, very comprehensive care site. So right now, bouncing between two hospitals and figuring out how to manage that.
Right now, you're busy.
Yes.
That's what it sounds like to me.
And the whole pandemic thing coming, that was
also
busy. Yes.
Also
that. So it's been a busy time.
Wow.
But fun.
Yeah. Frank, one of my favorite background stories about John, and John and Michael and I have worked together. John got into healthcare after completing his master's program and quickly sort of saw that the vision of healthcare was highly dependent upon the clinical aspects of it. So he said, you know what, I just need to go back and get a nursing degree too. So already in healthcare, goes back and gets a clinical degree. So I've always been impressed with the passion and the dedication that he brings to healthcare. Because of that, I think one of the many reasons that he and his team are passionate about it, John, you received a very prestigious, you and your team received a very prestigious award from the Baldrige Performance Excellence honoree. It's the highest presidential award for quality. But for those that don't know what that is, maybe tell us a little bit about that award.
Yeah, Rod, I've had a long history with the award, and I'll get into it in just a minute, but the award was originally established in 1987 by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce at the time. His name was Malcolm Baldrige. Fun fact, he was also a big rodeo fan and actually rode in rodeos while U.S. Secretary of Commerce. And in 1987, there was a lot going on in Japan with the manufacturing industry. You probably all heard of Lean Six Sigma coming out of Japan at that time. And they were really taking over and dominating the U.S. in quality products, errors per million, utilizing that. And Secretary Baldrige knew that if we didn't do something to counter that we would run into a problem. So in 1987, he established what became the Malcolm Baldrige criteria for performance excellence. And that criteria was intended to create a standard way to look at and ensure quality. And in 1999, those criteria extended to healthcare. And since 1999, 28 hospitals have been recipients of that quality award. And to Rod's point, it is a presidential award, so it's the highest quality award in the country.
Very impressive.
Wow.
As you've, of course, it's more than just an award, I suspect. Yeah. And there's a certain criteria that goes with that award. Maybe just talk about how that award has influenced your operating philosophy or how you're doing work at your hospital with your team.
Yeah, good question. So we'd have to start with the award is definitely not the important part of it. It's,
okay.
It's the journey that it puts you on, right? The award is certainly nice validation, but it's not the purpose behind it. And I've been fortunate starting out in my career. I did my residency out of grad school at a hospital in Tupelo, Mississippi called North Mississippi Medical Center. They're a two-time recipient, and they had received a Baldrige Award right as I was coming out of grad school. And so I really got in right at the peak of when they were in their Baldrige operating model. And so got to see the amazing results that it could produce, and have since then been a big fan of Baldrige. When I worked in Texas for Memorial Hermann, was a national examiner, state examiner. The hospital I was at there, we were on the Baldrige journey, achieved the state award, and before coming to Paulding. So I've been an examiner for more than a decade, and certainly been a big fan of the Baldrige framework. And the reason it's important, and I think one thing this past year has clearly demonstrated, is that we have to have an operating model. And Rod, I know you just mentioned that term, but a lot of organizations don't. Can you distinctly say how you operate your organization? And the Baldrige criteria, for those that aren't familiar with it, is not prescriptive at all. And in fact, it's just a set of about 350 questions.
Okay.
And it just asks you how you run your organization. And then there's a results section that asks you how do you prove that the way you run your organization works. And so it creates this framework for forcing you to define repeatable processes. And when we think about an operating model, that's really what that is. It's how do we create repeatable processes that are reliable, that produce results, and engage the team in a way that's meaningful.
John, when we worked together at Memorial Hermann, of course, the system was on a high reliability journey, and your hospital in many ways led the way. Tell us how that high reliability journey meshes with the Baldrige framework. Do they work together? Is it synergistic? How do you apply that high reliability to other parts of the organization?
Yeah, Dr. Shravitt, great question. So the high reliability journey is one I'm personally passionate about, and probably preaching to the choir for a lot on this phone, but healthcare doesn't do a great job in providing healthcare in this country. We were the third leading cause of death. I think we're now the fourth behind coronavirus, where error in healthcare causes death. And being the fourth leading cause of death, it's heart disease, cancer, coronavirus, hospitals. It's not exactly the grouping we want to be in. And so as we think about high reliability, we really have this ethical imperative to do better than that, to be better than fourth leading cause of death. And so high reliability in healthcare is certainly focused on quality and gives us a framework and some real tools and methodologies to move towards zero preventable harm, which is where we all should be heading. And it helps us create a framework that answers the questions, or creates processes that answers the questions in the Baldrige framework. So the answer is they work beautifully together. And in fact, I believe high reliability and the tools and the methodologies in that will help you on your Baldrige journey very quickly. If you can start to adapt those principles, it'll make a big difference very quickly and help you answer some of those 350 questions. And the great thing is we know that the outcomes are there. So the organizations that are on that high reliability journey that are pushing to zero preventable harm, certainly Memorial Hermann being a national leader in that, it works. And so you have the results to prove it, and it goes right into that framework with Baldrige.
That's fascinating. I'm hearing this kind of with fresh eyes, with fresh ears, seeing and hearing, I guess. And it's fascinating to me that there's 350 questions. It kind of asks you how you operate in your organization, and then it asks you to prove it out. I'm wondering what type of leadership characteristics are required to adopt kind of this approach. And you mentioned earlier that the award is validation, but not the purpose. So how does leadership and the leadership style impact the ability to answer those questions honestly and create those outcomes?
So the Baldrige criteria, there's 7 categories in the Baldrige criteria, and the category worth the most points is results. So you can say a lot of things, but do you get results? And that you have to prove that. And at the national level, it's not just average results, but are you a role model? Are you beating the top 10% in the country in the things that you do? The categories 1 through 6 are all about your operations, all about your processes. And of those categories, the one that is also worth the most points in those first 6 is leadership. It's category 1. And it specifically asks you, how do you lead? How do you as a senior leader lead? What is your leadership system? And what it pushes you to do is to be systematic with leadership. And I think a lot of times leaders may create very systematic strategic planning, performance improvement, but have they really created a systematic approach to how they lead? Have they documented it? Do they do it? Are there outcomes associated with it? And I think a lot of times as leaders, it's easy to slip into that. Well, I'll just figure out what I need to do today. Maybe I should round today. Maybe I'll go here. Maybe I'll go there. Maybe I'll ask this question. But have you truly sat back and said, all right, as a leadership team, these are the tenets that we're going to say are important. And these are the work we're going to do. Here's how we're going to measure it. And here's how we're going to embed that in a very systematic, repeatable process where all of our leaders are aligned around how to lead in the organization.
You know, John, working with leaders, particularly in a coaching role, there's not a lot of self-awareness sometimes among some leaders. And so what you're describing seems to me like a good process. It probably seems painful, but to ask a leader, tell me about, not how you lead, but why you lead and what are all the beliefs there. I mean, just unpackage that a little bit of how you go about that process. It seems difficult, but necessary.
It takes time, and it's cultural building, right? So, the first thing certainly at Paulding we did is take what culture was there, what was underlying, and then how do we truly define that? We use our cultural motto here, and if you walk through the hospital, you'll hear everybody from our frontline team all the way up. We're neighbors caring for neighbors. And we are a community-based hospital. And so we said, all right, what does that mean to be a neighbors caring for neighbor? What does it mean to be a leader that's a neighbors caring for neighbors? And we sat down with the leadership team and we defined that, and we created a leadership system. We said, what are the tenets? Well, we're all going to be servant leaders, meaning that we all are going to recognize that we're here to do nothing but give our frontline team the tools they need to do their job. And we declare that, and we train to that. We do education around that. We do our annual review process, and that servant leadership mindset's embedded in there. We also said we're going to create measurable objective goals for the organization down to the frontline team. And so we cascade our strategic plan all the way down to the frontline team. And so everybody knows what we're working on, why we're working on it, the purpose behind it. We also embedded into our recruitment and retention strategy, right? So as leaders, as we're hiring people in, ensuring we're bringing the right culture, we defined and said we're going to be a national leader in lean, and how we embed lean throughout the organization, not just a tool here or there, but we are a true lean role model. And so we sat down and defined them, and we put them in a document, and every leader signs it for me, and I sign it for them. We frame it, we put it on their desk as a constant reminder of what it means to be a leader at Paulding. And then we hold each other to that. And it creates a pretty exciting atmosphere because it's palpable when you walk through the building. You can feel what it's like to work in an organization that's that aligned, that's that excited, that trial and error, that understands what they're doing. And when we started the journey, the interesting thing was, the team said, well, how can we take on one more thing, right? How can we do Baldrige? We got so much going on. We're very lean. And I promised them that if we did it, that we would move from firefighting to fire prevention and your life would get better. And that's happened. I think they would all say Not that we don't have our fires that come up. Not suggesting we're perfect by any way, but for the most part, that alignment creates an easier place to work.
I'm interested to know when you felt that shift from firefighting to fire prevention. Is there a story or a moment in time? And maybe it wasn't a moment. Maybe the word moment is the wrong word, because anytime you're transitioning culture, it is a long-term process that you see incremental change. But I'm wondering if there's a story that you can maybe showcase the parallels between the firefighting aspect and the fire prevention aspect, and when you started to see that culture was really starting to become high performing and high reliability.
Yeah, I think I would offer this up. And I think sometimes in leadership, when we are, especially around culture, we hope to see some sort of immediate change. I did this and look how great I am. And now the culture is different.
Yeah.
And I think it rarely works that way. Maybe there's leaders out there that can do that. I'm certainly not that talented of a leader.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't.
Yeah, it's incremental, right? It's small things along the way.
Yeah.
I was proud. We had our safety huddle this morning, and it's always led by an executive. I lead it if I'm here. And we had some really great discussion. And our nurse managers and our lab manager are all talking about the trials that they are proactively doing, that the frontline team came and said, hey, this is a barrier to discharge. And we utilize visual management. If you come into any of our departments in the building, literally any of them, we've got PI visual management daily huddles where they do frontline problem solving with the team around what they're working on. And this morning, I have 4 different leaders trialing 4 different things around 4 different issues in their unit, one around falls, one around readmits, one around discharge, and one around lab mislabeling, where the frontline team came forward and said, this is an issue. We want to help fix it. To me, that is that proactive, right? It doesn't build to a point where suddenly we've got a safety event around lab mislabeling.
Right.
We had 2 lab mislabels happen, and the frontline team said, we got to stop this right now. And that's where, if I look up after our journey and where Paulding has come, that's where we're not fighting fires. We are identifying early, often, and preventing.
Wow.
Very impressive, really, because those are the kind of events that, not just the lab relabeling, but the others that you could, in other circumstances, pass off. It wasn't serious, nothing bad happened, it won't ever happen again, et cetera. But it sounds like your crew realizes they know better and better fix it on the front end. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
So how's the medical staff fit in all that, John? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, these are sort of, good things to do. It takes a little effort to get people behind, but as you well know, in healthcare, we've got this other organization called the independent medical staff that has to be brought into this process as well.
Yeah. So what I would say, with our leadership team, I cannot give enough credit to the rest of the executive team and our frontline leaders throughout Paulding, because they could have embraced this or not ultimately, and they did. And it's certainly their work that has led to this. And so I'm blessed with a very great team here. The other is on the physician side, it's similar. And what is no different than our frontline non-physician team. They want to do the right thing for the patient. They want to come to a place that's enjoyable, that brings joy to them to work at, that they feel like they're making a difference. There's no difference there. And so we bring our physician partners in. I've got just exceptional physician leadership here at Paulding with our medical executive committee, our medical directors. And so we talked to them about it early and often and said, this is where we want to be. We want to be the best hospital in the country. We want to have 0 preventable harm. No one should come in the building. We want to be truly neighbors caring for neighbors. And here's the why, and here's how we're going to get there, and here's what we need from you. And they embraced it, and they've been hugely supportive. They're part of it. Our hospitalist medical director has learned Lean, and he leads the hospitalist in their visual management deployment. He's part of our A3 processes. Our chief of staff, our ED medical director, they're all involved, and they all are part of that. And so the physician really for us is part of our workforce, and we treat them like that, and we ask them to be involved, and they all jump right in, independent or employed.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you quickly, if you could pinpoint some of those characteristics that, and pointing back to Baldrige as well, but also thinking through just the structure and the culture. I'm a big culture guy. What do you think the leadership characteristics that you're particularly proud of, or you feel need to be present to most represent this type of organization in a leader specifically, or in anyone?
Yeah, I don't have anything probably new or unique around that, except that I would say that I have raised, I guess is maybe the wrong or right term, but through healthcare to be servant leadership. I firmly believe that, and I love healthcare. I love working in healthcare. I love helping drive improvement. What I most love is serving our leadership team, and I want to break down barriers and get out of the way, and that's the expectation of every leader here at Paulding. Is the characteristic is you're going to be a servant leader, and we're going to be here to support. We're going to be a yes culture, not a no culture. And we had that discussion today, some really remarkable patient experience things where we had some unique situations, and our team said yes, and they figured out how to get the ventilated patient out into see some space. They've been in the hospital 90 days on a ventilator with COVID.
Wow. Yeah.
And finally was able to sit up and wanted to just see something besides the room that they had been in for 90 days. And so the ICU and respiratory team safely figured out how to get the patient to what we call our overlook. It's a beautiful glass space we have that overlooks a beautiful view. And they got them there, and it's a yes culture. So I think as leaders, we have to just say, how are we going to put the patient first? How are we going to put our staff first? I certainly believe that if you do the right thing for the patient, the right thing for your staff, you engage your physicians, everything else falls in place: financials, quality, experience, that kind of thing.
So John, you obviously thought about servant leadership for many, many years. How's your definition of that changed over the last 10 years or so?
There's several ways I think I would say change. One, I've certainly learned a lot over the last 10 years and made plenty of mistakes as a leader. So I think my definition has probably matured a little bit. I think early in my career, very focused on more of title, I guess, and moving up and ensuring that I'm getting and it wasn't even title, it's more of ensuring that I'm getting the right experience to further my career and having people under me and all those kind of things. Now I realize more and more that that's not really the leadership style ultimately that works, right? It's not an authoritarian. It's how do you lead from the heart? How do you lead as a servant leader, regardless of who does or does not report to you? You can make a difference. And so I think I like to think maybe I've matured a little as a leader. Who knows? My team may say differently, but I think that's been a change, and that's probably not that a different view of servant leadership. It's probably just I've started to maybe figure out how to apply it better and better. Certainly still have some work to do as a leader. And then, I think one of the things that, I think the last year and a half has really changed leaders for the good and bad. And it's been a tough year and a half. I mean, it's been unlike, I believe, anything that we've seen in healthcare. And, as you think about being a servant leader, it goes more from this notion of how can I break down barriers for the team to do a really good job as a servant leader, to how can I be a servant leader to help care for our team's resiliency, emotional well-being, burnout, even more so than ever before. And so it's almost a shift in where you're focused on being a servant, less of do they have the right equipment, the right processes, the right amount of staff, to how are we doing emotionally, mentally, from a stress perspective over the last year. So I think there's been a little bit of a shift for all of us in that.
See, John, mature may not be just quite the right word because you look like you might be a freshman in college. But,
John is 18.
Yeah, I'm very advanced.
Tell us how the framework held up under the stresses of COVID, because it sounds like it hit your hospital, Paulding, the way it hit the rest of the country, and there must have been incredible stresses that had to have weighed against some of the Baldrige principles. I mean, it was a very difficult situation everywhere. So tell us what happened with all the principles in the middle of a disaster.
Yeah, so I would like to give some context. We certainly Atlanta was hit pretty hard. So in January of this year, we hit our peak, and at Paulding we were at 350% capacity in our ICU. The hospital itself was about 180% capacity. It was tough. We were team staffing in the ICU. We were shuffling ventilators amongst hospitals. We were figuring out how to utilize space that was not necessarily intended to be ICU space because there was no choice. And all of Atlanta was like that. It's not like there was somewhere we could have sent these patients. We had to take care of them. And so certainly there are times in there where all of the processes you have set up, you may take a pause on. We weren't doing RCAs at that time. And that wasn't because they weren't important. It's because every leader I had was taking care of a patient. In fact, the joke around was I even went and got recertified for IV sticks and medication administration because that's where we were. My CNO was taking ICU patients. So I was like, we're all going to jump in. And so there are some things that pause. But what I would say is that the framework doesn't say that's good or bad. It doesn't ask you that. What the framework does is ensures that we're nimble. And so because we had systematic approaches, we could identify when and how we needed to shift staffing, how we could listen to our frontline team to understand what we needed to work on, how we reset priorities. At that time, doing an RCA on a near miss just wasn't priority. We now got 350% capacity in the ICU. So I don't know that it's necessarily that things didn't hold up through the Baldrige framework. In fact, without it, I think we'd have been in worse shape. And some of our outcomes have remained remarkable. Our mortality is still in the top 1% in the country, even including COVID. Our falls rate is still top decile in the country. Our patient experience has remained top decile. And our inpatient is actually, for everything, our inpatient has actually gotten up to top quartile through that. Our employee engagement, I'm proud of that. We took a pulse survey. So Paulding we routinely score in the top 100 in the country in the Great Places to Work survey, and their benchmarks around 91% positive of your staff. And in November, we took a pulse survey in the middle of a pandemic to understand where we were. And we dropped to 83% of our staff were engaged in the work they do, which wasn't totally surprising. But I'm proud to say we retook that here in May after doing some work around it. We moved back to 88%. Now, it's not at the 91 we were pre-pandemic, but we still lead the healthcare system. And 88% of our team, 92% of our team took the survey, and 88% of them said this was a great place to work. And coming out of a pandemic, I think that's pretty remarkable. So I think without the framework, without the culture that we've set up, that wouldn't have happened.
Impressive. Thanks. Wow.
John, a while ago you mentioned the concept of zero harm. And of course, Michael and I in our work with Relia do a lot of work with organizations. And one of the principles of high reliability that we convey is this idea that zero harm has to be a core value. And not surprisingly, most healthcare organizational leaders would say, oh yeah, zero harm is a core value here at this organization. But it's rare that you see someone have that deeply embedded belief such that it results in operational examples of that. And so just curious as you started your journey there, how difficult was it to adopt, for the organization to adopt core as a core value, that's a principle of zero harm? And then perhaps what are some examples that as the senior leader of the organization, it validates for you that it is a core value?
Yeah, so I have to give credit. Before I joined Paulding, there was a cultural foundation that was built by our chief nursing officer and the executive team. And Vicki Hogue, who's our chief nursing officer, is retiring at the end of this year. And I begged her not to many times. She's a remarkable leader who was on the Baldrige journey and on the high reliability journey before she knew she was. And so she had put a foundation in place that allowed us to tackle this notion of zero harm. And for me, I believe that notion of quality zero harm has to start at the executive team, and we have to carry the flag. And so we just said, here's the tenets of the executive team leadership that we're going to carry forward, and we're going to carry these expectations down. And that is rounding with purpose and asking the team, tell me where a patient may be harmed today, or where can you see that we can do better, get better. writing those down, fixing them. I firmly believe that the safety huddle is a powerful tool. A lot of organizations do it. A lot of them, in my view, don't do it well. It becomes a report out, not a safety discussion. And so we revamped and created different standard work around how we do our safety huddle every single day. And the tenet was at the time, anybody that's AOC was leading safety huddle, and we changed that and said an executive team member is going to lead it, and I'm going to lead it as hospital president. I'm going to stand there and lead it unless I'm not in the building. In which case, the expectation is our CNO or CMO lead safety huddle, and that says a lot. And then the other is we said we're going to be involved in RCAs, and so as hospital president, I want to be involved in every RCA if we have one. I want to know what's going on. I want to sit in the room. I want to hear. I generally sit quietly because there's much smarter people talking about what happened, but it's powerful when the executive team carries the flag and does it in a meaningful way, investing in time, investing in supporting the team, and then creating this notion of not being punitive, right? So one of the things that we use, and the language sounds funny at first, but anytime somebody brings up a safety concern in safety huddle, I thank them. I thank them specifically and say, thank you for having the courage to talk about that in safety huddle. Because it's hard to come forward and say, I had a fall on my unit and the safety alarm wasn't set. Or the fall alarm wasn't set. And have that discussion in front of your peers can be a difficult thing. And so creating an atmosphere where we can openly, transparently talk about how to improve, I think is imperative.
I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about, I know the term servant leadership is used oftentimes. I think, John, your definition and approach is wonderful because you're not only talking about patients, you're talking about team members, staff. You're talking about care for everyone. I'm wondering, for those individuals that have probably passed through the halls that haven't agreed to or adopted this approach to leadership and this call, what does that conflict resolution look like when someone is stepping in and doesn't showcase that type of leadership and leadership behavior that creates those psychologically safe environments that you're mentioning now?
So you're asking, like, if it's a frontline team member that doesn't, or if it's a leader that doesn't?
I'd say leader. Let's start with leader. Yeah.
Well, one, I would say I'd be disappointed if we hired somebody that had that attitude.
Right.
We're very, very transparent in the interview process of the expectation and around culture, the behavioral-based questions we ask. We talk openly about our vision of providing world-class healthcare, and at Paulding, that means we're going to be the best in the country. And so I would say a couple things. One, we would work to not hire somebody in who doesn't culturally align.
Right.
We're not perfect with that. If we do, then we give them the opportunity. We explain the why. I'm a big believer in coaching. I do not believe any leader gets into healthcare with the intent of being bad at being a leader. And so how do we align them and give them the why behind, what we're doing and why it's important and why it does matter if they set up their stat sheet appropriately and have that daily discussion with their next level, leader. And so it can take a little bit of time. We work to be patient, but ultimately we set the expectation. And look, I kick off day 2 orientation here at the hospital, and we tell everybody sit in the room. We talk about this statistic that I mentioned earlier around being the third, now fourth leading cause of death openly in the room. And my statement is, we can't be average. Average leads to 35 deaths a year per hospital in this country. Can't be average. Came here to be average. Please get up and leave.
Right.
Because you're not going to end up working here. It's just not going to work out for you. And so we just have a transparent conversation about that expectation.
John, I'm sorry, Frank. He just briefly touched on something I think that's very important.
Rod, go.
I think it's a soapbox I've got to get on.
Come on, please, let's do it.
Please.
I've been waiting for this all day.
Yeah. Now, he talked about the use of behavioral interview questioning, and excellent point that we see so much in healthcare and in all organizations, really, of people utilizing past experience, reading too much into resumes. And from my perspective, the only time that your previous experience is going to be an absolute predictor of success in your organization as if they were dealing with the same people, the same issues, the same culture as they did before, because people behave differently. And so what John has just very briefly pointed out is their use of behavioral interview questions are, it's not tell me what you've done, it's how would you respond to these. And so it's using situations such that John and his team can get an idea of, are they really a good fit for the culture? Most organizations just say, well, we're going to pick some people and then we'll decide if they fit the culture or not. And in most cases, once they're in the organizations, a lot of leaders don't have the courageous discipline to move them either to the place they need to be or out of the organization. And so I just didn't want us to miss that connection that John has placed upon behavioral interviewing as part of creating and protecting and retaining this culture.
Rod, can I share? I think it's a really good point, and had a really interesting conversation today with one of our assistant nurse managers, and she's been hired for ICU. She's been hiring for RN positions and interviewing new grads, and we have a very robust new grad program that we bring in for nursing. And her comment was, which I love because I think it speaks to this behavioral. She said, "I'm looking for fit. I can teach anybody the technical skill."
Yep.
And so and she's exactly right. I mean, you can, if they fit culturally, you can teach somebody the technical skill. And I think it goes back to the behavioral based interviewing. But I was kind of proud of that moment because I'm like, that's exciting when I got our assistant nurse managers who are bought into this idea that cultural fit is more important than technical competency.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's not only so disruptive to the organization to have people that don't fit, very costly. It's also a nuisance and sometimes a risk to license for people that do fit to have others on the team that don't. So we appreciate that. Frank, by the way, we could probably remind our listeners that if they have a question, they can put it in the comments of whatever portal they're watching this on. We'd be happy to, our behind the scenes producer, Maggie, will monitor those and put them up on the screen if you have questions.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, I just want to comment that with regard to the behavioral interviews, all of us in healthcare have experienced so many situations that there's no shortage of them to present to prospective applicants.
Absolutely.
You can imagine.
Yeah. How would you handle this? Yeah.
How would you handle this?
So it's very interesting to hear as I've been learning more about healthcare organizations, but you've so clearly articulated that focusing on culture yields business outcomes. Focusing on the development of people and the accountability of leadership behaviors actually produces additional opportunities for the business to grow and thrive. And I think so many leaders today are challenged by that notion that good culture equals better business. But you've proven it clearly. And I think so many organizations are starting to recognize that when you create an atmosphere of care, psychological safety, servant leadership, that produces people that want to come to work, that want to do the best work they possibly can. And when that happens, all of these business outcomes fall into place. The money arrives where it needs to arrive. The reduction in hurt or death reduced. I mean, all of these things are cascading from this one idea that culture actually is valuable and it is necessary to sustain an organization.
And as we've heard from John, it helped him get through a pandemic.
Absolutely.
I mean,
the resilience.
Yeah, it's a defense mechanism for that as well.
I think the other thing that I'm taking away from John's presentation is that it's not just him. Okay, it goes all the way down the line to second and third level leaders, all the way down to care units, and their staff. So it's not just a miracle CEO can make it happen. It's got to be something that's transmitted all the way through the organization, and that can be difficult. How, John, tell us about, we pay a lot of attention to the frontline workers and the nurses and the ED and the hospitalists, et cetera. But how do you make sure that spirit and that leadership and that culture gets into the parts of healthcare, the hospitals that we don't usually see? Supply management, inventory management, pharmacy, behind the scenes? How do you make sure it's there as well?
Yeah, it's critical in those areas, right? I know we tend to think of hospitals as doctors and nurses, and it's certainly a great deal beyond that. For us, those departments are no different and treated no different than our nursing units, than our physician partners. The expectations are the same. Our EVS, our supply, our pharmacy, they all utilize the same goal setting. They all utilize the same visual management. They all have the same purpose behind what they do. And we're very intentional when we stop and all of our leaders, when they recognize great work, good catches, safety stars, it includes and encompasses our entire team. We had an amazing EVS team member recently that spotted a stroke on a patient and spoke up. And we thank them in the same way we would a nurse who identified that, right? And so when you set those expectations and you have a conversation that here's how you save lives, as an EVS team member, here's how you save lives. That's another. I love getting new team members in during day 2 orientation. So we talk about this notion of high reliability and these statistics and how we can't be average, and then we go around. Then we go around the room and I say, all right, each of you can save a life. Food nutrition, how can you save lives every day? Well, if you put peanut butter on an anaphylactic allergic patient who's already immunocompromised and having COPD exacerbation, that may kill that patient. Lab, if you mix up the test result or you contaminate, that may cause a course of change of care. So every single person in the hospital has a extremely important part of this notion of zero harm. You can't get there if your EVS team isn't on board. Because if they're not disinfecting appropriately, if they're not hand hygiening in and out of rooms appropriately, you're never going to get there. And so, and even better, if they can't look at the doctor and say, hey, doc, you missed the hand hygiene station coming out, then you can't get there. And so for us, it's creating, and we're not perfect. We still have pockets where we continue to work and focus on this, but bringing in all of those support services in a meaningful way with the same kind of expectations.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your visual management and how you apply that through clinical and non-clinical areas?
Yeah, I'm really proud of our lean work. I knew not a lot about lean coming into Paulding, and I was asked for Paulding to be the pilot site for the system for a lean management system. And so truly embedding it from the strategic planning process all the way through how we operate every single day. And so we use the term visual management is very broad. Typically, a lot of people think of it in PI visual management lanes, but we use visual management in a lot of ways. So if you think about Kamichi Bai, certainly PI visual management, there's a lot of ways in which we can use visual management. In my office, I have a leader standard work board, so you can see what I did and did not get to from my leadership perspective very transparently in my office every week. And so for us, we use visual management throughout the organization in a variety of ways. One of the very powerful ways is every one of our department is asked to use visual management in a variety of ways for the work that they're doing. And so if you go into one of our nursing units, you may see a visual management lane on patient experience where they are trialing different tactics as a unit on how to improve patient experience. You may see a board that's a Kamichi Bai board where they're rounding and ensuring compliance to our central line bundle, and they're marking red or green and identifying opportunities. We use pick charts in every unit where the team can identify opportunities and they work through them as a team through our pick chart system, escalating all the way to the executive team. Our EVS team, if you went down, they'd have the same thing. They'd have a lane that's focused on high touch cleaning. They'd have a lane that's focused on room turnaround times. And so whatever the opportunity is, and that's aligned strategically through the goals that we set in the department. And the executive team's no different. We have a strategic deployment room. If you walk in, I've got a lane. I've got a PI visual management lane around patient experience I'm the executive sponsor on. And we go through our strategic work as an executive team every week. And we have a highly visible room where you can come in and see how we're doing. And you can see how that aligns throughout the organization.
I've been to organizations, hospitals, and health systems where those visual boards are literally where patients and families walk in but in others where they're in back rooms. And I don't know what's your approach at Paulding.
You'd have to come to Paulding. We don't have any back rooms. The hospital was built on the notion of transparency. So all of the conference rooms, my office, everything has glass doors. And so in the middle of the unit where we don't have nurses stations, we have decentralized nursing here. But the conference room is glass, and it's in the middle of the unit, and the patients and families can walk by and they can look in because the hospital is built on the notion that we don't want any patient or family member to feel like something's happening behind closed doors without them. Mm-hmm. And so the PI visual management's right there. It's not locked. It's wide open, so they can see the good and bad of what. See our last serious safety event. We don't intentionally hide any of that.
Even the building is aligned to your vision. That is incredible. Like the architecture of it is crafted around visibility, transparency. That's great.
It is,
I love it. From literally from the foundation.
And I take no credit. Again, going back to Vicki and her vision, this was a Pebble Project hospital. It's a beautiful facility, but it's designed for patient safety, staff safety, and environmental safety. So we're one of 2 geothermally heated and cooled hospitals in the country. So
this is getting cooler. Yeah, by the minute. This is getting literally
it's pretty impressive.
We might want to do a live tour broadcast.
We're coming over
at some point. Hey, John, one of the things as Michael and I work with organizations on high reliability, we use this principle, and it's sort of helpful that no organization ever reaches high reliability. We're all on a journey. There's always things to improve. It seems to me that there may be some challenge with if we're pursuing the Baldrige criteria and then all of a sudden we win the award, we're done. We've accomplished what we set out to do. I know that's not the case. So how do you keep the momentum going?
Yeah, we're not even close, right? In a lot of ways. And I'm proud of the work we do, and we have remarkable outcomes. But we had over 40 OFIs identified in our National Baldrige Feedback Report. So we have plenty of opportunity for improvement in the work that we do. And we have pockets where we aren't best in the country, right? And we tackle at those. And so we are far from being the airline industry or nuclear power here at Paulding. Now, we do a remarkable job, and we're one of the best in the country, and we can objectively measure that. But I will tell you, we're not anywhere close. And every single time we have a safety event, it affects every person in this building because we know about it, we talk about it, we learn from it. I wish we were perfect, and I often tell the public that when they go, well, you won Baldrige and you have all these accolades, but this happened to me in your building. I said, I'm sorry. We still mess up, and we'll learn from it. That's the key, right? It's not that we are perfect. It's that we are transparent and we're learning from where we mess up. And that's probably way more important than any sort of award or statistic. It's that we are open to getting better and recognize that we still got a long way to go.
Well, kind of along those lines, also in high reliability, we'll see organizations where we believe high reliability is something appropriate that they should pursue, but they're just not ready. I mean, in other words, if they don't have some things in place, it's really going to be a waste of time, effort, and money, and frustrate people if they try to pursue high reliability. How does that apply to Baldrige? Are there some organizations where you would advise them, it's right for you, it's the appropriate criteria, but don't waste your time. You're not ready.
I get this question a fair amount. It's, how do I start? Or I don't think my organization's ready to start. What I would say is there's 2 pathways for Baldrige. One is you can be on the formal journey where you're writing an application and you're submitting at the state level, and you have to win at the state level before you can apply nationally. And you can be on this formal journey where you're seeking the feedback from external people coming in, and the survey process is intense, right? For Baldrige, it's worse than Joint Commission. There are 12 people that spend hundreds of hours on your application before they even do a site visit, and then they spend a week with you, and they will come at night and interview the EVS team member and ask them, I hear, your CEO says that the culture there is around neighbors caring for neighbors. Tell me about that, right? And so it's challenging. So there's a lane for being on that formal journey. What I would say is the other lane around just picking up the questions and just starting to ask your organization or yourself the questions, anyone can do. I don't care where you're at. You can say, do we have a systematic approach for strategic planning? Do I have a systematic approach for how I lead? And what I even encourage is, for non-executive leaders out there, you can pick that framework up, read it, and apply it to your department. You can still create systematic approaches and results and be transparent within your department, regardless of what's going on in the organization. So I think there's a lot of ways to get an entry level into utilizing that framework.
That's fantastic. I wanted to ask, what advice would you have for people that are actively pursuing the adoption of these criteria? What advice would you give to someone who says, you know what, I want to adopt it, and having gone through this, and what you've already accomplished at this point, what advice would you have for those people that are willing to go on the journey, either organizationally or individually?
Yeah, so I would kind of frame that in two ways. One, for someone who is maybe early in their career, looking to move in their career, make thoughtful choices about where you work. And I've been very fortunate in my career to work for some really great people. Two of them were on here, and they did not pay me to say that, but I've always maybe like no, but I've always sought out to work at organizations where those things matter, right? And I'll tell you, Dr. Shabbat led a system-wide call every month where we transparently talked around safety incidents that occurred at any hospital. And I don't even know how he had the time, but he knew every safety incident, every background to it. And when you got on that call, you had to be ready to go and talk transparently about not only the issue, but what you were going to do about it. Now, he was the CMO of a extremely large, $6 billion healthcare system. And if there was a fall at Katy Hospital, I better be ready to talk about it. Even if there was no injury, I better be ready to talk about it. And that's a culture and leadership that I've always sought out, because I think you have to look to people that you want to emulate, right? So I would say that as one section of it. The other is just, how do you personally start getting involved with it and start making a difference? And so, as a leader, how do you start then becoming responsible for emulating those things that you have always looked up to, and then seeking guidance from others, transparent input as to how you're doing with that. I think it's important.
Wow.
Well, Frank, as you can tell, John is a remarkable leader who's continuing to build a remarkable team over there at his organization. We were thrilled that he was able to come and be introduced to our audience today. I think we, as many have seen, there are many corollary points between high reliability and the use of the Baldrige criteria. As John pointed out early on, the interesting thing about the Baldrige criteria, it's not a checkbox. We do that. It's more of a structural system to be thoughtful, introspective about what we do, and then deliver on what we do. And so we find in our work, a lot of organizations don't take the time or apply the necessary energy to really being thoughtful about those things. And as a result, the organization starts to manage itself, becomes very chaotic. People don't understand the purpose from which they're serving. The roles and goals are not clear to everyone, and those generally result in a failure or at least some optimization of the organization. So very proud of John. He's done extremely well in his career, and we look forward to hearing and seeing what he does in the future. But we were thrilled to introduce him to the audience today.
This is wonderful, Michael.
It's been a real a learning experience, and I think John has helped round out the thought that high reliability, safety, and quality is kind of core to healthcare, but it's just one part of leadership, and it's that kind of thoughtful approach that really needs to be applied to all of leadership and all the areas of a healthcare organization, carrying that through all the way to the individual staff. And as John knows, even high reliability, safety, and quality, that doesn't work until it's down to the individual staff member, whether they're in EVS or pharmacy or on the front line of the ED. So I think what John's been able to do is really remarkable for his hospital and for his organization. And I let me ask one question, and John, I don't know if you're prepared to answer it, but I know your system has multiple hospitals, and of course you're now interim president of one and president of the other. Some health systems have gone for Baldrige, which is a huge undertaking for a health system. And I wonder, what if your system is beginning to be on that journey? Are you leading the way, or what's the status?
Yeah, Wellstar is a phenomenal organization. They live their vision, which makes them exciting to work for. The answer is yes. And there are several individual hospitals on the journey. So our flagship hospital, our 600 plus bed hospital, Kennestone, was a Sterling recipient last year and applied for the national award. They're waiting to hear if they're going to get a site visit this year. Cobb is going to also be submitting a state award. Our West Georgia and North Fulton hospitals are all doing the same. And so the thought is, as we create, and what I'm attempting to help with is, as we create these applications at each site, there's a lot of it that is the same, right? Our IT, our supply chain, most of our strategic planning, a lot of that's aligned across the organization in a meaningful way. And so writing the applications that set us up for potentially a system application is certainly, I think, very doable for Wellstar.
Well, I'll just close with saying I had the opportunity a couple years ago to speak with the combined medical staffs and executive leaderships of Wellstar and about high reliability and safety. I was very, very impressed with the leadership. That was before, I think, you were with Wellstar.
It was.
Now it's even better.
Wow. That's wonderful. And I did want to say quickly thank you to Don and to Brandon for dropping in and sharing some of your comments and thoughts as we were discussing. There weren't any questions, but we did have some comments from some folks validating some of the conversations we were having around the behavioral questions, as well as the idea that small and intentional decisions to serve everyone makes a great system. And so I appreciate coming in and kind of adding that additional commentary. And, John, I've taken 3 pages of notes from our conversation. I think it's fascinating. And to be honest with you, very moving that this exists. And I think the most powerful thing that has continued to rattle around in my mind as you've spoken and we've had this discussion is that the award is the validation, but not the purpose. And, we're coming in here talking about the value that this award brings in regards to its showcasing what a healthcare system can achieve, hospital can achieve. But in reality, it's all about the behavior of the individuals and how that behavior, starting with leadership, actually creates an environment where people care. And it's not just about patient care, it's about team care. It's about valuing the individual. And it's just wonderful to see and very thought-provoking as we move through whatever this landscape looks like for, this next, close to post-pandemic phase, and what will come out of that and how that will shape the future of care. So I'm inspired, I'm moved. And John, I just wanted to ask you if you had any last words for the folks that are watching or for us.
No, I encourage anyone interested in Baldrige to certainly go to the NIST website and do a little digging into it. And thank you all for the opportunity. This has been really fun. And Frank, I'll make sure and shoot you an email as soon as the BlackBerry is released, so you can sign up.
It needs to come from the BlackBerry, and it needs to say sent from BlackBerry. Like I need it, and I need you to take a selfie with the BlackBerry. For whatever reason, I still have an old Motorola Flip Razr phone because they were so cool. It feels very nostalgic. I know there's a lot of technology built into it, but I can't wait, John.
You got it. You got it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Take care. Bye-bye.